Born under thunder and shadow, Ragnar Lothbrok came into the world with fire in his eyes and destiny whispering his name. From the first hunt in the dark forests, to his first clash with a man, and the forging of a ship that would carry him beyond the horizon, his path was treacherous, filled with betrayal, battles, and ambition. This is the story of a boy who became a legend, a warrior who rose to lead, and a name that would echo through the ages. Ragnar Lothbrok, the legendary Viking king. On a stormy night, under the roar of thunder and crashing waves, a child was born in a humble Viking settlement. His cries rose with the storm, fierce and unyielding, as though the gods themselves had summoned him into the world. The village whispered in awe, for the seer had spoken of this birth long before it came. An old woman, cloaked in shadows, had foretold, "Ere boy shall rise with fire in his eyes. He will shake kings, he will defy the gods, and his name will be remembered for centuries." The newborn lay silent after his first cry, gazing into the darkness with a strange calmness. His mother shivered, clutching him close, for even she could feel that this child carried the weight of destiny. No one knew then that this boy, named Ragnar, would carve his legend in blood, storm, and glory. But the gods were watching, and they do not gift greatness without a price. Ragnar grew among the fjords, where the sea met the sky and the winds carved the cliffs like blades. While other children played with wooden toys, Ragnar carved his own spear from driftwood and aimed it at shadows. His father, a seasoned warrior, watched him with a stern gaze. "A man must learn to fight before he learns to walk," he said, placing a real axe in Ragnar's small hands. The boy nearly staggered under its weight, but he refused to drop it. His knuckles turned white, his eyes burned with determination. The village mocked his eagerness. "He is just a boy," they said. But Ragnar trained every dawn, striking the air, swinging until his arms gave out. When he bled, he laughed. When he fell, he rose again. One evening, while the fire crackled, the seer appeared once more, her eyes glowing in the flicker of the flames. She pointed at Ragnar, whispering, "The boy who grips steel before his time will grip the fate of nations." And so, the path of Ragnar Lothbrok began not in glory, but in sweat, pain, and the echo of a destiny too great to ignore. The forest was dark, damp, and alive with whispers. Ragnar, still just a boy, walked beside older warriors on his first hunt. His hands gripped a spear, the wood rough against his skin. His heart pounded like a war drum, but his eyes, sharp and burning, betrayed no fear. They tracked a great stag, its prints pressed deep into the mud. 4 hours, the hunters followed in silence, until at last the beast appeared, antlers like a crown, body towering over the boy. The others raised their bows, but Ragnar stepped forward. Foolish, they thought. Brave, the gods whispered. With a sudden cry, the stag charged. The ground shook beneath its hooves. Ragnar planted his feet, his spear trembling in his grip. At the last heartbeat, he thrust forward. The stag fell, roaring in its death throes, and silence swallowed the forest. The hunters stared in disbelief. The boy had slain the beast with hands barely strong enough to hold the spear. Blood splattered across his face, but Ragnar only smiled. That night, as the fire lit the sky, they no longer mocked him. They spoke of destiny. The boy who killed the stag was no ordinary child. He was chosen. Not long after the hunt, Ragnar's village was raided. At dawn, the sea carried black sails, and warriors poured onto the shore like wolves. Steel clashed, shields cracked, and the air filled with the screams of battle. Ragnar, still barely more than a boy, was ordered to hide with the women and children. But the fire inside him refused to stay hidden. Gripping his father's axe, too heavy for his arms, he slipped into the chaos. Through the smoke he saw a raider break through the line, his father's shield shattered, his life hanging by a thread. Ragnar's legs moved before his mind did. He rushed forward, raising the axe with a cry that pierced the roar of battle. The raider turned, laughing at the child who dared challenge him. But Ragnar's strike came wild, desperate, and fueled by something more than courage. The blade cut across the man's arm, blood spraying the ground. Shocked, the raider staggered back, and Ragnar struck again, this time sinking the axe into his side. The man fell. Ragnar stood frozen, chest heaving, eyes wide, not from fear, but from the intoxicating realization. He had slain his first man. The other warriors watched in awe. The boy who should have hidden in the shadows had stepped into the fire of battle and survived. From that day, Ragnar Lothbrok was no longer seen as a child, but as a warrior in the making. After the raid, while the village buried its dead, Ragnar sat alone by the shore, staring at the axe still stained with blood. The weight of it pressed on him, not just the iron in his hands, but the burden of killing. An old warrior named Hastan, scarred and bent from years of battle, approached him. His eyes, pale as winter sky, studied the boy in silence. "You killed a man today," Hastan said, his voice like gravel. "Do you feel pride?" Ragnar shook his head. "I feel or fire." The old warrior nodded. "Good. Pride blinds a man. Fire drives him forward." He placed a heavy hand on Ragnar's shoulder. "But remember this, to fight is not enough. Any fool can swing a blade. A true warrior must think. A true leader must see further than others." For weeks, Hastan trained Ragnar not just in strength, but in patience, how to read an enemy's eyes, how to wait for the right moment, how to command not by shouting, but by earning respect. Ragnar listened. He absorbed every word, every movement, like the earth drinking rain. And though his body was still young, his mind grew sharp, his spirit restless. One evening, as the sun bled over the sea, Hastan told him, "You will be more than a warrior. The gods have marked you. One day, men will follow you not because they must, but because they believe." Ragnar's heart thundered. For the first time, he felt it, the pull of destiny. The nights grew long, and Ragnar often walked alone to the cliffs where the sea roared against the rocks. He would sit for hours, staring at the horizon, where the sky and water met in an endless line. Hastan had taught him patience, but Ragnar's blood burned with restlessness. He wanted more than battles between villages, more than raiding neighbors for cattle and grain. He wanted to see what lay beyond that horizon. One night, as the moon cast silver on the waves, Ragnar spoke aloud, "The world cannot end here. There must be lands beyond, cities richer than our dreams." The sea answered with a crashing wave, as if mocking him, or perhaps daring him. In his dreams, Ragnar saw visions, ships with sails like dragon wings, carrying him across vast waters. He saw cities with walls of stone, treasures spilling like rivers of gold, and kings kneeling before him. Each dream ended the same way, with ravens circling above him, their wings black against the sun. The next morning, he approached Hastan. "The gods show me the sea," Ragnar said, fire in his eyes. "They whisper of places far away. I will not die here, raiding farms and villages. I was meant for more." Hastan studied him quietly, then smiled, a rare, weary smile. "Then you must learn not only how to fight, but how to sail. The sea is crueler than any king, boy. It will test you, break you, or crown you." Ragnar clenched his fists as the wind whipped through his hair. In that moment, the sea became not just water, it became a promise. As Ragnar grew, so did his hunger for the unknown. The sea whispered to him louder with every tide, and the idea rooted deep in his mind. He needed a ship of his own. The longboats of his village were strong, but clumsy against the vast ocean. They were built for shallow waters, for quick raids against neighbors, not for the great journeys Ragnar imagined. One day, while helping repair a damaged vessel, Ragnar traced his hand along the curved planks. He studied the way the wood bent, how the nails fastened, how the sail caught the wind. But in his eyes, he saw something greater, a vessel faster, sharper, alive, like a serpent cutting through the waves. "Why stare so long at old wood, boy?" one of the men mocked. Ragnar only smiled. "Because I see something you don't. I see the ship that will take me where no man has gone." The laughter followed him, but Ragnar didn't care. Each night, he sketched in the dirt with a stick, holes shaped like dragons, sails wide as storm clouds. His friends shook their heads, but his mind burned with invention. The seer returned once more, as if drawn by his obsession. She whispered, "The ship you dream will carry not only men, but destiny itself. But beware, Ragnar, the farther you sail, the closer the gods will watch." Ragnar's heart pounded. He knew then that he would not simply ride ships built by others. He would create the vessel that would carve his name into history. The dream of a ship could not stay only in Ragnar's mind. It needed wood, iron, and fire. One dawn, while the village still slept, Ragnar walked alone into the forest. His axe was small, worn, but his resolve sharper than steel. He searched for the right tree, not just any oak, but one that whispered power. Tall, unyielding, older than generations. Finally, he found it, a giant, its bark scarred by storms, yet standing proud. Ragnar placed his hand upon it and whispered, "You will sail with me." The first strike of his axe echoed through the woods. Blow after blow, his arms ached, but he refused to stop. Sweat poured, blisters tore, yet by nightfall, the tree groaned and fell, shaking the earth. Ragnar stood over it, chest heaving, and for the first time, he felt he had conquered nature itself. Dragging the wood back was impossible alone, but fate intervened. A grizzled blacksmith, Eric, saw the boy's struggle. Amused, he asked, what madness drives a child to fell such a beast?" Ragnar's eyes burned. "I will build a ship, one unlike any before." The blacksmith studied him. Most would laugh. Instead, he nodded slowly. "If you bring me timber, I will bring you iron. Together, we will see if the gods favor your dream." A bond was forged that day, between the boy with vision and the craftsman with skill. With each strike of the hammer and each carved plank, the ship of destiny began to take shape in their minds. Day after day, Ragnar and Eric labored by the shore. Logs became planks, planks became ribs, ribs curved like the skeleton of some sea-born beast. Ragnar's hands bled, his muscles burned, but he smiled through the pain. Each strike of the hammer was a heartbeat of his destiny. Yet the village did not share his vision. Men gathered, shaking their heads, laughing openly. A boy building a ship? He thinks himself greater than kings. Better he learn to farm than chase the sea like a fool. But Ragnar never lifted his eyes to their jeers. Instead, he carved each piece with greater care. Eric, though old and scarred, began to admire the boy's madness. "They laugh now," he muttered, "but when the waves carry you farther than any man, they will tell your story." By moonlight, Ragnar would whisper to the rising frame of wood. He dreamed of dragons on the prow, sails swelling with wind, and horizons no Viking had yet seen. The mockery grew louder, but so did the sound of hammers and swords. Children stopped playing to watch. Warriors grew silent as they passed. Slowly, laughter turned to whispers. Was it possible? Could this boy truly craft something greater than the gods intended? The keel lay ready. The skeleton of a legend was born. The day had come. The keel of Ragnar's ship, still raw but magnificent, rested on rollers at the shore. The village gathered, some curious, most mocking, as Ragnar and Eric prepared for the first test. Ragnar's heart thundered. He had carved, hammered, and dreamed this vessel into existence, but now it would face water. One wrong wave, one misjudged angle, and it could shatter, along with his reputation. The villagers jeered. "A boy and his toy will drown," they shouted. Ragnar ignored them, gripping the ropes and adjusting the rudder. Eric placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "The sea does not care for fear, boy. Trust her. Respect her. She will answer your courage." The ship touched the water. A shudder ran through its wooden frame. Ragnar held his breath. Slowly, it floated. Then, with a push, the vessel began to glide along the waves, cutting through water like a dragon's fang. Cheers erupted from the few who dared watch quietly. Laughter turned into astonished silence. Ragnar's eyes sparkled, not with pride, but with hunger. The horizon stretched endlessly. Beyond it lay the worlds he had dreamed of. That day, the boy was no longer just a builder. He was a sailor, a visionary, a Viking destined to carve his name into history. Ragnar stood at the prow of his ship, wind tearing through his hair, eyes fixed on the horizon. The village behind him felt smaller, tighter, almost suffocating. He had seen what the sea could offer, and it whispered promises of glory, treasure, and battles beyond imagination. Word spread quickly. Other young warriors, inspired by his courage and his ship, approached him. Some sought to join, others to challenge. But Ragnar, with fire in his eyes, addressed them. "We will not sail to steal cow or grain. We will seek what the world hides: cities, riches, honor. Those who dare follow me, follow destiny itself." The call of adventure stirred the hearts of men. Old sailors whispered tales of lands beyond, of kings who trembled at the thought of Viking ships appearing on their shores. Ragnar's ship, still raw and untested, would lead the first of many daring voyages. That night, the seer appeared once again in a dream, silhouetted against a burning sky. "The gods have marked you. The seas will test your courage, your loyalty, your soul. But the world will remember your name." Ragnar awoke with a roar, gripping the helm. This was no longer a boy's dream. This was the beginning of a saga. The first voyage of Ragnar's ship brought them to a distant coastal village. Smoke rose from chimneys, unaware that the dragon-headed longboat approached silently under the moonlight. Ragnar's warriors looked to him for command. He had trained them, inspired them, and now it was time to test his leadership. "Steady," he whispered, voice like steel. "We take what is ours, swift, silent, precise." The raid erupted like lightning. Ragnar struck first, his axe biting through the chaos. His men followed, disciplined and fearless. They moved as one, a shadow of vengeance and fire. The villagers screamed, caught unprepared, and within hours, the spoils were theirs. But Ragnar did not rejoice. Each swing of the axe, each fallen opponent, reminded him that victory came at a cost. Blood and fear were powerful teachers. He had learned the first lesson of command. A true leader bears the burden of every life lost and every decision made. When the raid ended, Ragnar stood at the prow of his ship, looking back at the village consumed by fear and awe. He felt it in his bones. He was no longer just a boy or a warrior. He was a captain, a force to be reckoned with, and his legend had begun to spread beyond the fjords. Ragnar's ship sliced through the fjords, carrying treasures and tales from the distant raid. As they approached the village, smoke from chimneys seemed small compared to the fire of stories spreading among the villagers. Word traveled faster than the longboat itself. The boy, the child who carved a ship and sailed beyond the horizon, returned victorious. Some greeted him with awe, bowing before the young captain. Others whispered in shadowed corners, their envy sharp as axes. "Who is this child, daring to command men and conquer lands? What arrogance!" Ragnar noticed it all but did not react. Instead, he walked among his people, counting the spoils, listening to the elders, and teaching the young warriors. His reputation was no longer built on fear. It was built on respect earned through action. The seer's prophecy echoed in his mind. He will shake kings. He will defy the gods. Now, the boy had become a man, his legend growing with every whisper, every glance, every awestruck gaze. But envy is a quiet predator. Ragnar would soon learn that admiration often hides danger, and the greatest threats come not from distant lands, but from those who stand closest. Ragnar's victories and the tales of his raids had spread like wildfire. Villagers who once mocked him now bowed, but not all were sincere. Among the elders and warriors, murmurs of jealousy festered. One evening, as Ragnar oversaw the repair of his ship, a group of older warriors approached, axes in hand, eyes full of challenge. "You think yourself greater than all of us?" their leader sneered. "A boy commanding men who have fought longer than you've walked? Prove yourself, or step aside." Ragnar's eyes burned, but he remained calm. He knew brute force alone could not win this battle. It required strategy, wit, and courage. He proposed a test, a duel, not to kill, but to prove skill, leadership, and heart. The duel took place at dawn. Steel clashed, sparks flew, and the village held its breath. Ragnar moved with a strange mix of fury and control, his blows precise, his mind alert. One by one, his challengers fell back, exhausted and humbled. When it was over, the leader knelt. "You have earned your place, for now," he admitted, begrudging respect in his eyes. Ragnar knew this was only the beginning. Jealousy would follow him like a shadow, and his path to greatness would demand more than just strength. It would demand wisdom, courage, and sometimes mercy. Victory had a bitter taste. One morning, news reached Ragnar, his closest friend, a young warrior who had sailed beside him on the first raid, had fallen during a skirmish on distant shores. Ragnar's chest tightened. He had led men to battle, but never truly understood the weight of their lives, until now. Faces of fallen comrades flashed before him, each one a reminder that glory always demanded a price. He stood on the cliff overlooking the fjords, wind tearing through his hair, and clenched his fists. Rage, sorrow, and guilt intertwined, forming a storm inside him. "Why them, and not me?" he whispered. Hastan, his old mentor, approached quietly. "Every warrior bears loss, Ragnar. Pain shapes the soul as much as victory shapes the name. Learn it now, or it will consume you later." The boy who once killed a stag and a raider now tasted the cost of leadership. From that day, every decision, every raid, every battle carried weight beyond pride. Every action would echo in the lives of those who followed him. And yet, even in sorrow, the fire in Ragnar's eyes refused to die. Loss had strengthened him, sharpened his resolve, and etched the first lines of legend across his heart. Ragnar's ambition now burned brighter than ever. Tales of distant cities filled his mind, but one city stood above all: Paris, rich, fortified, and seemingly untouchable. With his longship ready and a crew loyal beyond measure, Ragnar set sail. The fjords disappeared behind him as waves slapped the hull. The wind carried their determination. The sea tested it with every swell. During the journey, rival leaders and experienced sailors warned of the risks. "Paris is a fortress. You'll die before your ship touches shore," they said. Ragnar only smiled, eyes fixed on the horizon. Fortress or not, it is destiny waiting. Storms came, waves roared like giants, but Ragnar's resolve never wavered. Each night, under starlight, he studied maps, traced enemy lines in the sand, and whispered plans to his men. "We strike where they least expect. We will show them the fury of the north." The journey was long, grueling, and tested every ounce of skill and courage. But as the first stone walls of Paris appeared on the horizon, Ragnar felt it, the pulse of a city, the thrill of conquest, and the fire of legend calling him forth. Paris rose before Ragnar like a giant asleep, its stone walls defiant, its gates tightly sealed. His crew looked to him, their faces a mix of fear and excitement. Ragnar's grip on the helm was steady, his mind already mapping every possible attack. He gathered his men on deck, voice carrying over the waves. "This city has never faced us. We strike with speed, with cunning, and with the fury of the north. Remember, victory favors the bold." Boats approached the riverbank silently, hidden under darkness. Arrows flew first, a test of defense, then Ragnar's warriors charged. Steel clashed with steel. Fire met timber. Ragnar led from the front, axe flashing, voice booming, striking both fear and awe into friend and foe alike. But the city was stronger than expected. Towers loomed, Defenders fought fiercely, and Ragnar realized brute force alone would not win. He adapted, directing men to exploit weak points, moving like a shadow across the battlefield. Days passed, the siege testing every strategy, every man's endurance. Ragnar learned quickly, leadership was as much about patience and planning as courage. Yet through it all, his spirit never wavered. The city would bend, or he would carve a path through it. As Ragnar's forces pressed against Paris, not all battles were fought with steel alone. Among his trusted men, whispers of doubt and greed had begun to grow. One night, as Ragnar planned the next move, he discovered betrayal, supplies stolen, a secret path revealed to the enemy. Rage and sorrow collided in his chest. The siege, already brutal, became bloodier. Friends he had trusted, men who had sworn loyalty, had turned against him. Ragnar's heart ached, not just for the lost advantage, but for the fragile trust shattered before his eyes. He confronted the traitors, his voice cold as northern ice. You chose greed over brotherhood. You chose death over honor. Know this, betrayal is a blade that cuts deeper than any enemy. The consequences were swift. Ragnar executed justice, not in haste, but in measured resolve. Some lives ended, others banished. The weight of command had never felt heavier. Yet through the grief, Ragnar's determination hardened. Paris would not break him. His men, though shaken, rallied around him with renewed loyalty. And Ragnar understood a crucial truth: the world respects not the innocent, but the relentless. The siege of Paris had pushed Ragnar and his men to the brink. Exhaustion weighed heavily, but the fire of ambition burned stronger. Ragnar studied the city walls, seeking the slightest weakness. Under the cover of dawn mist, he ordered a bold maneuver, sending a small, swift strike team to scale the lesser guarded eastern walls while he feigned attack at the main gate. The plan was risky, but Ragnar's mind was sharper than any blade. The maneuver succeeded. The eastern gate fell, chaos erupted among the defenders, and the city trembled. Ragnar's men poured in, their cries echoing over stone and timber. The clash was fierce, brutal, and merciless, but Ragnar's strategy held. When the sun set, Paris stood humbled. Ragnar, blooded but unbowed, surveyed the conquered city. He did not rejoice in plunder alone. He understood that true victory lay in leadership, courage, and vision. Stories of the young Viking who had conquered the mighty city spread across lands far and wide. Ragnar's name began to echo beyond the fjords, whispers of a legend who would challenge kings and defy the gods themselves. Ragnar's longship cut through familiar fjords, laden with treasure, stories, and the aura of legend. The village that once mocked him now awaited in awe. Children ran to greet him, elders bowed, and even rivals watched in silent respect. Celebrations erupted. Feasts, songs, and tales of daring spread through the halls. Ragnar, however, stood quietly at the prow, eyes on the horizon. He had tasted victory, but he knew the world was far larger, the challenges far greater. Hastan approached him, nodding with quiet pride. You have returned as more than a man. You are a symbol. Remember this, your legend will grow not in ease, but in trials yet to come. Ragnar raised his axe, not in boast, but in promise. The fjords echoed with his name, and even the winds seemed to carry it farther than any voice could. He had returned victorious, yet restless, for the fire of ambition now burned brighter than ever. The boy who once carved a spear from driftwood had become a man who would shake kings, sail unknown seas, and carve his name into history. The legend of Ragnar Lothbrok had truly begun.